Just leaving the beach, thinking about some of these things that are going on politically in my home beach town, which is Folly Beach, South Carolina, basically Charleston. But I'm real familiar with all the other fights going on in many other places around the United States and the world. And I want to just explain and kind of give fair warning to people that have really gone against the short-term rental ability for people and taken away people's rights and really damaged people. There are multiple lawsuits around the country that are getting more and more engaged. And there's also a really big federal national class action lawsuit that's being constructed as we speak. And all of these towns like Folly Beach, Tybee, and I can go on and on and on, the towns are going to be named, the council members that have voted for these things are going to be named, and even some private citizens that helped instigate these things are going to, at the very least, be deposed in part of a discovery process, because there's quite a lot of, fundamentally, and this is nothing threatening or whatever, it's just sadly what has to be done sometimes to defend things, is real people have been materially damaged by these unfair laws. And the fair warning I'm trying to give to people, so hopefully rational people, especially as we come up into election cycles around the country in these various municipalities, it's very important for these potential new elected officials coming into these situations to understand that just because a local law got passed doesn't mean that that law is fundamentally constitutional and not, in fact, will potentially be found illegal, and that your city has to pay back big fines and damages and sometimes make the restrictions less, like what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina not too long ago. One of the most recent victories is in South Lake Tahoe, victories for the short-term rental people that want to protect their traditional property usage rights, where after roughly, like, I'm going to paraphrase, but like a 7-year battle, yeah, it was found to be what the city of South Lake Tahoe did once it got to state level, once it had to be adjudicated up to that point. They found, like, yeah, this does violate people's fundamental rights. And in almost every case where this gets to a high enough state level or starts to approach federal level, these local municipal laws get overturned. And listen, for anyone out there that is snickering as I say this or whatever, or don't think I know what I'm talking about, like, hey, whatever, I'm just telling you, there's precedent here. They're found to be violations essentially of the 5th and 14th Amendment, more or less revolving around due process. And of course, if you study it, the 14th Amendment is like an expansion of the 5th Amendment and gets more detailed. And it's also about otherism, second-class citizenry type stuff. So due process and otherism. And in the due process part of things, like, let's just talk about Folly Beach in particular, but this is really true with many of them. It's due process because if you are a property owner on Folly Beach, but are in many of these small towns and not a full-time resident, you had no ability to vote in the referendum that occurred, and therefore you did not get any due process on a radical change to your historical property usage ability, and still to this day have no agency in that system. So you had no legal due process in the change of what happened, right? Because they're not a full-time resident, they can't vote in the local referendum, even though it was a narrow issue item of just the short-term rental related thing that's basically going to change a property usage right. And it's not like there's not a precedent for non-residents being able to vote on how their property usage is affected in the future. I mean, if you're a part of an HOA, you own a condo in Destin, Florida, but you live in Birmingham, you get to vote if the HOA is going to change a property usage thing. So there's not this radical concept, but and hey, maybe you don't want those people to be able to vote, but if that's the case, then you can't rationally change their fundamental property usage. And this is, I mean, again, it's not my opinion. I'm explaining to you what has been found in other court cases, and it's been overturned. Because when you walk into that town hall and that city council meeting and you stare up at those flags on the corner and you see the local flag for your city there, and then maybe you see your state flag, and on top of that you see the red, white, and blue, well, that's because you and all of you elected officials, it doesn't matter if you've got a hyper vocal small local constituency that maybe even puts you into power or whatever just to do these things. You made an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and every United States citizen, especially if they own property in your town and they're a United States citizen, even if they don't live there full time, they are still afforded rights by the United States Constitution. And if you violate those rights or go along with something or don't help stop something that's in violation of those rights, especially as you should be well aware by now, and believe me, let this message serve you notice that there are subpoenas on the way. You are about to be deposed, okay? This is happening in a near time frame, and that's all I'll say. But just be ready for it. Like even, and again, to the 14th part, the otherism and stuff, when these laws get created, well, if you live here, you can do this X amount of days in the market, but if you don't live here full time, you can't rent it these amount of days, or we're gonna, like, no, that's not, that's not right. And again, it's been found to be overturned, but you don't have to believe me. You'll see what's coming. I guess my main thing is to really try to get more education out there to people in a calm way of, like, one, you see these people that are so opposed to short-term rentals as if they're just the most damaging thing to a community or whatever. And yet when you look at the numbers and the facts, you see that, yeah, actually the calls for noise violations and all this stuff are really nominal and all this and that. I mean, like, it's almost irrelevant because it's been turned into such an emotional argument and a us versus them type of thing. And, all of this. The bottom line is, though, if you're breaking somebody's constitutional rights and somebody's not getting due process, expect people to fight back for their rights. And if you've done things, really gone out of your way to materially make these things occur, and you've also spread lies quite often or very highly curated data to skew your arguments, and you used a lot of political pressure to make these things happen, don't imagine that you're somehow immune to consequences from taking those actions. I mean, you'll see. It's absolutely coming, and it's coming soon. So I would just say to anybody that's coming into political office or that is going to be in any kind of way responsible in some of these municipal elections coming up around the country, that I would highly recommend that you really study some of these other cases like Wilmington, North Carolina, like South Lake Tahoe recently. Realize that you are the stewardship of not only the people that live there full time, but of every other stakeholder in the community too. And that through action or inaction that denies people due process, that certainly your city and perhaps yourself may be found liable. And don't imagine that, if you imagine that you're not, or dismissive of this kind of thing, like, just really try to open your mind and open your heart and realize that real people have been damaged, materially damaged by these actions that have had absolutely no agency in the issue. And that's just fundamentally unfair. And I think everyone can agree that livability issues should be paramount, and that the best way to achieve livability concerns is through enforcement of rational regulation that is agreed to by a true consensus of the population. And anyway, that's kind of all I got to say about it. You can study the Constitution yourself, you can study these lawsuits yourself, but just, here's one way of notifying people about it. There'll be a lot more official notifications as this class action lawsuit evolves. There will be more very formal, certified letters of things, making sure that various elected officials and other public figures are made very well aware of this situation. And we'll see how people react. Unfortunately, I think there'll only be something maybe like 20 or 30%, as I've studied some of these things in the past and other issues. Only about 20-30% of people will kind of wake up and say, man, we really should correct course. And unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people that won't, and they'll be obstinate and their heels dug in, and it's going to be really unfortunate expense to a lot of municipalities out there. Anyway, that's all I got. Feel free to comment below.